So it's time to go through my power rankings after Major 1 of the CDL. This event was absolutely crazy and full of a ton of shocks, so this is very different power ranking from what it looked like when I made this before the event. But now that we've seen the teams play a handful of series, I think we will finally get our power rankings in a good place going forward for the rest of the season. So here we are on the power ranking sheet, and we're going to start it off with my 12th ranked team, which is the London Royal Ravens. As you can see, London is down 5 spots from where I had them before the Major, and overall London just looked to be a super disappointing team. I mean, they haven't won a series since the first week of qualifiers where they started 2-0. And then now here they are, very similarly to another team, as you can see on my post-major news right down there. Boston was another team that started 2-0 and, you know, hasn't really been able to find much success. But London overall definitely looked bad. And if you haven't seen yet, it looks like Scraps is going to be coming in for Paul X. Scraps, who is already on the roster, looks like will be filling in for Paul X in that flex role, so that'll be interesting. And then coming in at number 11, I do have the LA Gorillas, which is down 3 spots from last power ranking. I think overall, there's a couple teams you might be able to fill into this spot, but LAG just looks super weak. And now with the rumors that Arcides might be going to Optic maybe buying out Arcides, I think that could be pretty interesting because I don't know, there's just something about this LA Gorillas team that isn't really working. There's obviously plenty of time for them to figure it out, but who knows if they'll even get that chance. Coming in at number 10, a team I already talked about, Boston Breach, down 4 spots. As you can tell, the teams here are obviously down a pretty far, pretty far jump from where they were, or a pretty far fall, I guess I should say, from where they were. Boston was a team that honestly, going into the year, I thought was going to be really good. After week 1, I thought looked really good, and even heading into this Major, I thought was going to be a dark horse. They didn't even qualify for the bracket play of this event, which is super unfortunate. I mean, only 8 teams qualified for bracket play, so that leaves 4 CDL teams as well as all 4 amateur teams from this Pro-Am not making bracket play. But Boston was a team that I actually thought was going to be able to at least make bracket play, so definitely disappointing. I know Awakening was sick or had some illness issues going on, so Beans had to step in their last series, but overall, this Boston team is pretty disappointing for what I expected. Coming in at number 9, our first team to jump up is the Las Vegas Legion, up 3 spots. I had them in last. I now have them in 9th. I think the Legion have showed some good promise. I think they showed some capabilities of winning series. I've really been liking what I've seen. But inconsistencies, obviously, among the team. I mean, Prolu will have a game where he'll go absolutely crazy, like 1.5 KD, and then he'll have a game where he gets like a 0.6 KD. So, gotta find consistencies amongst the players. TJ had the craziest 2 search and destroys I've ever seen. He went 15-2 in game 2 of one series in search and destroy. And then in game 5, he went like 1-8. So they got to figure out consistencies amongst their players and, you know, from map to map. But overall, good promise for Las Vegas. I mean, already I think I've won like the same amount of series as they won last season. Coming in at number 8, I do have the Florida Mutineers jumping up 1 spot from last power ranking. I think Florida is showing that they're a team that you really can't underestimate, but it's also very difficult. And I'm going to bring in my next team to give a little explanation. I do have Optic at number 7. Some people might think Florida should be above Optic, right? They did knock them out of the group stage, and Florida moved into bracket play at the Pro-Am, and Optic obviously did not qualify. But they've already faced off against each other 3 times in the CDL, right? Optic beat them 3-0 in their first meeting in the qualifiers, then beat them 3-2 in their second meeting, which was the first time they played at the Pro-Am, and then they lost to Florida in the third time they played to not qualify for the bracket play. So definitely interesting. I mean, Optic has already beaten them twice, whereas Florida's beaten them once. So just for that reason, I have Optic ahead of them. But, you know, and even on paper, obviously the Optic team looks just better overall. But Florida has been super surprising and is a team that I'm very interested in watching because I think they're the kind of team that's going to be pulling out these series in like game 5s and really close matches. And before you know it, they might find themselves up as a top 6 team because I think they're just going to keep pulling out wins we're not going to expect. Coming in into our top 6, at number 6, I do have the Minnesota Rocker down 4 spots. I thought the Rocker were, you know, a top 3 favorite going into this event. Kind of underperformed, you know, not horribly underperformed, but if we look, I have the brackets up on my screen. If we look, I mean, they lost 3-0 to the Subliners in the qualifying stage, and then they got 3-1 by Toronto and then 3-2 by Vegas. So overall, just not great showing out of the Rocker, but obviously pretty new team, you know, just starting to play together. I mean, you have Attach and Afro who haven't played with these guys. You have Cammy and Bance who are obviously played together in Toronto, but now overall, I think this team will figure it out. They got good leadership. They got veterans. And I do think this is a team that shouldn't be too worried about their placement at Major 1. At number 5, I do have the LA Thieves down 1 spot from last power ranking. I think the Thieves look solid. You know, there's things they need to clean up on. They definitely need to work on their game a bit. But overall, I mean, I wouldn't be too worried, right? We saw what they did last year where they started out, you know, pretty slow for the good portion of the season and then ended up, you know, winning back-to-back majors, you know, winning Major 4 and champs. So I'm not too worried about the Thieves, and still ended up being in kind of my top 5 range. I think a lot of teams people would have them there. I think they should be okay. At number 4, I do have Atlanta FaZe down 1 spot. I'm surprised that FaZe, you know, didn't make a finals, right? We're so used to them being in the finals, but I mean, they still placed in the top 3 at the event. Overall, I thought this team looks pretty solid. They definitely need to work on their hard point. I don't know what their hard point record was, but it had to be pretty awful. There's definitely things that they need to work out, but you know, once they figure out their hard point, I think this team's going to be crazy because they've been really good at search and destroy. You know, when you bring in Slasher, it's going to do that to a team, but hard point has been their biggest struggle. So if they get that sorted, they're going to find themselves in Championship Sunday pretty much every major. Now into our top 3. Number 3, I do have Seattle Surge up 8 spots. So you'll see 2 of the 3 teams in my top 3 I highly underrated going into this event, mainly because, you know, first major, don't really know what to expect. We'll get into the other team in a minute, but you know, Seattle didn't look great, but they're a team that I think could be really good. I'm really happy how far they made it. I think this is a team that I really have high hopes for. Similarly to Boston, I kind of had high hopes for Seattle, even higher than Boston because of how good they ended last season. But I think Seattle's a really good team. And I think moving all the way up into the top 3 where, you know, obviously I had them, I think at 11th last power ranking, which might be a bit disrespectful, definitely was surprising based on how they looked in the qualifying rounds. And the whole team looks really good. I mean, Pred and Sib obviously looked good. Mac looked pretty solid. Accuracy looks pretty solid. So overall, I think this team is in a good place. Then coming into number 2 and number 1. At number 2, I do have the Toronto Ultra down 1 spot. And at number 1, I do have the New York Subliners up 9 spots. I had them at 10th. Now they're in number 1. I obviously had them at number 1 because they won the major. It's the only major we've played so far. So big props to them for coming out after starting out week number 1, going 0-2 and literally looking like the worst team in the league to come all the way into winning this event. Absolutely crazy. I don't think pretty much anybody could have predicted them to win this event, but you know, they looked pretty good coming into the event after week 2 of qualifying, and then in this event just looked pretty dominant. If we pull up the bracket here, let me actually go all the way over so we can look at the standings first. So NYSL finished 2-2 with a 7-8 map count record or game count record. So they only won 46% of their maps coming into this. Then in group play, they 3-0'd LAG and then they 3-0'd Rocker. So right away in group play, looking amazing, honestly. I mean, 3-0ing LAGs, whatever. 3-0ing a Rocker is pretty crazy. And then coming into bracket play, 3-1ing Florida Mutineers, who just came off beating Optic. That's a solid win. Getting 3-1'd by Seattle Surge, you know, kind of, I predicted Surge to win this series, but you know, so it wasn't looking too great. But then they 3-1 Vegas, they 3-2'd Ultra, who I thought was the best team, and then they 3-1 FaZe, and then they 4-1 Seattle in the finals. So overall, I mean, the run, if we look at this, so if my math is correct, their map count at this event was 23-9, which is, I mean, come on, that's amazing, right? To go 23-9 in a map count to be winning that many maps, it's just totally crazy. To have the ice to win 3-2 here against Toronto Ultra, who looked like the best team. And I mean, just watching them perform, they looked incredible throughout most of this event, which is why I do still actually have them in my top 2, right? I do think that they made a great case for themselves. They looked really, really good. If you wanted to switch them with the likes of Seattle and put them down to 3, you know, whatever. If you wanted to even switch them with FaZe, because FaZe did beat Toronto at the event, you could do that. But I think Toronto, for me personally, definitely deserves to stay in my top 2 because the series that they win, they look incredible, right? They look almost unbeatable in the way that New York Subliners looked throughout this entire event. So I think Subliners and Ultra both had this level of just like almost unbeatableness, seriously, that they had playing at this event when you watch them play. I'm really excited to see how the rest of the year obviously shakes out, but especially the next weeks going into Major 2 in the qualifiers. I can't wait to see how this goes. Now that we have a better baseline for these power rankings, you're going to see probably less big jumps like you're seeing here, 9, 8, -5, -4. You're probably not going to see as many big jumps like that, but who knows, right? If next you know, these next qualifiers, LAG go undefeated, Boston go undefeated, Toronto lose all of their matches, right? We're going to see big jumps. So definitely interested to see how it goes, but I do think we're starting to get an idea of kind of the upper echelon teams, the middle pack teams, the lower teams. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to drop a like. Let me know down below who you think is the best and worst team in the league in your opinion. With that being said, hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.